Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today, we're going to continue on. We're doing a week of classic double albums. Okay, and today we've got two big ones by two of arguably the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. Okay, we've got the White Album. That's really white, isn't it? From the Beatles. Okay, released in 1969. Then we're going to go up to 1972. For Exile on Main Street by, of course, the Rolling Stones. You know, two very, very popular albums. Two albums, you know, for some folks, maybe kind of bloated. All right? But I think we cannot deny that there's some absolutely legendary songs on both of these releases, right? So let's kind of talk about each one of them. I'll tell you what I love about them, maybe what I don't love about them, and then I'm going to tell you which one I kind of favor over the other, right? So, this album here, kind of a mishmash of like everything that the Beatles did, but of course this is much later in their career. This is right before the band broke up. Okay, not about a year before they broke up. You know, as history kind of shows it, this was the album that caused quite a bit of turmoil within the band that eventually led to their breakup not long after. All right, so kind of a, important album in their career, probably for not the right reasons, but a massive seller nonetheless, multiple times platinum. I believe here in the U.S. it sold like in excess of 12 million copies or something like that. So, you know, a big seller. Number one on the Billboard album charts after it was released. Ironically, not a lot of like, you know, hit single type material on here, but a lot of really great deep album tracks. So why don't we kind of take a look at some of these tunes, especially the more memorable ones. Okay. So, 4 sides of vinyl, obviously, on its original release. Kicking things off with Back in the USSR. Don't know how lucky you are. A kick-ass Paul McCartney tune. I love that tune a lot. Then you got Dear Prudence, a John Lennon track. I always had a soft spot for Dear Prudence. What else is really cool on side one, anyway? Obla Di, Obla Da. Silly song, but man, hook-laden like only the Beatles can do it. The continuing story of Bungalow Bill. Hey, Bungalow Bill. A fun tune. I think one of the things I like about this album is it kind of contains some of their like dark rockers, some, you know, good rock and roll, and some of that silly kind of pop stuff that they were noted for, as well as plenty of psychedelia. It's kind of all here. Then, of course, you have perhaps the greatest song on the album, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Okay, written by George Harrison, featuring none other than Eric Clapton on lead guitar. What else as we may move our way through the album? Blackbird, another McCartney pop gem. Rocky Raccoon, another silly McCartney track that, I don't know, just, I dig it. What else? Why Don't We Do It in the Road? A lot of McCartney tunes on this album, all right, quite a bit. What else we got here? Birthday. Okay, that's a McCartney and Lennon track. Today's your birthday. It's my birthday too. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that song. Everybody loves that song. One of my other favorites on this album is a Lennon tune called Your Blues. And I love the kind of stinging bluesy guitar work on that album. You know, it's just got a really, really good kind of gritty sound to it. Big fan of that song. Another Lennon tune that I like a lot on this album is Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. Very cool tune. Sexy Sadie. You got Helter Skelter, another McCartney tune. Hard rocker. Love that song. Of course, Revolution 1, another tune by Lennon. What else we got back here? Cry Baby Cry. All right, and Revolution number 9, which of course is the height of psychedelia, all sorts of weirdness in that particular song. So, you know, some really, really memorable tracks. On the same token, you know, probably a good amount of filler. But because there's so much material and so many good tracks, you kind of overlook the stuff that's kind of like, almost like throw-in material, right? So, but, you know, in saying that, kind of the same thing with this album, with Exile on Main Street. So I will go on record as saying that I probably did not really get this album, meaning really appreciate it, till probably about 5 years ago. I mean, when I first started getting into the Stones, and, you've heard this from me before, I was not into the Rolling Stones at all when I was a kid. In fact, I despised them, an up-and-coming young teenage hard rock and metal fan, man. The Rolling Stones were just like persona non grata for me. So when I finally started to get into the music of the Stones, probably in the mid-90s or so, I actually did not warm up to this album a lot because it's, a lot more rootsy, folky, kind of acoustic country rock in nature, at least a good portion of it. I preferred like the Sticky Fingers, It's Only Rock and Roll, Let It Bleed, all that kind of stuff. But about 5 years ago, and I think it was with the release of the reissue, or maybe it was the documentary, I don't know what it was, but something finally clicked with me about Exile on Main Street and finally got me to understand and realize just what a great album it actually is, which people had been telling me for forever. So, of course, just like the Beatles album was kind of steeped in controversy, Exile on Main Street, no different. A lot of these tunes were kind of written and started years before they actually released the album. And then, of course, the band became tax exiles. So what did they do? They ran to like the south of France, to Nelcote, all right, and they moved into like this, big villa, and there started a year-long descent into, rock and roll, excess, the drugs, the alcohol, the women, from all accounts. I've read a couple of books on the kind of Exile on Main Street times, all right, in the life of the Rolling Stones, and man, that was like, debauchery at its best, folks. But what it did was produce a lot of really, really great songs. This almost became like, Keith Richards' baby, all right? And in fact, I think when you really listen to this album, this is basically Keith and Mick's show from start to finish. But more so, I think that a lot of what Keith was going through at the time, hanging out with all sorts of different people, a lot of influences on this album that really you don't see on a lot of the other Rolling Stones albums. Okay, you got Mick Taylor also on board. I think, however, that this is more of a Keith Richards album than a Mick Taylor album, as opposed to the couple albums before and after that Mick appeared on. So what do we got? Kicking off, got some great rockers on side one of the vinyl. You got Rocks Off and Rip This Joint, which I actually love. Shake Your Hips, okay, a remake of a Slim Harpo tune. Casino Boogie, Tumblin' Dice, one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs of all time. A great, great track. Then on side two, I love Sweet Virginia. Sweet Virginia is such a great tune. Again, it's kind of laid back, kind of country-ish, sort of kind of bluesy. All right. Because, Keith, of course, was hanging out with folks from the fabulous Burrito Brothers at the time. Torn and Frayed, another great tune. Sweet Black Angel, Lovin' Cup. Lovin' Cup's a great tune. Happy. Happy's a great song. A very happy song. What else? You got some, Turd on the Run, Ventilator Blues, I Just Want to See His Face, Let It Loose. Let It Loose is cool. All Down the Line's a great rocker. Stop Breaking Down, okay, very cool version of an old Robert Johnson tune. Shine a Light is a great song. Soul Survivor. Then, of course, you got some leftovers and stuff which appeared on here. You got Plunder in My Soul, Pass the Wine, a bunch of other tracks that were kind of leftovers from these sessions. But, So what do I think when I put both of these together? I thought long and hard about this. And, generally what I do when I'm getting ready to do these album war shows is no matter how many times I've heard either of the albums, I like to go and listen to them again and refresh myself before I actually record the video and kind of give my pick and my take on all this kind of stuff. And I was all set last night to come out and say that I like the White Album a little bit better because there are some tracks on here that I think are top shelf, top-notch Beatles that are some of my favorite tunes from them. And yes, I know some of you are going to ask, Pete, when are you going to do a top 10 Beatles show? It's coming up. Just hang in there. But in the end, when I put this album on, this has become like a feel-good album for me. And I think for me, Exile on Main Street is like a perfect kind of like summertime soundtrack. All right. So this, when I'm sitting out by the pool, maybe got a barbecue going, everybody's kind of hanging out, I more often than not will try and flip this on at some point during the festivities. This has just become like a kind of like feel good, summery, just good time album. And yeah, while it's got some filler on it, I think this album has more filler, and I think the filler on this album is weaker than on this album. And I think that while this one might have a handful of more classic tunes, I think overall I just get a lot more enjoyment out of this album for whatever reason. It's not by much. It's not by much. Like I said, I really dig this album a lot, but I think, like I said, when it comes down to it, I just enjoy listening to Exile on Main Street just a little bit more. It just, I don't know, gives you that special feeling that goes all throughout your body. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain how certain music affects you in a certain way, right? And this album and this era of the Rolling Stones, the Mick Taylor years, just really does it for me in a way that the Beatles just don't quite for me. Though I love the Beatles, okay, and I really dig this album, and I really love the Beatles' second half of their career. Revolver and On Up and all that kind of stuff. I really, really like that era of the Beatles. But there's just something about the Stones, man, that just does it for me. And I just, I like this album just a little bit more. So there you have it. Your mileage may vary. You may prefer the White Album, and that's totally cool. Like I said, I almost went with that. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I got to go with my gut is telling me. Okay? And I know there's going to be a lot of people like, oh, it's the Beatles. They'll win every time. And that's all fine and dandy. If that's the way you feel, that's very cool. All right? Because, yeah, I mean, they were great, obviously. Legendary band, one of the best of all time, obviously. If that's, if you are on board with that, that's totally cool because there are millions of people that will agree with you. And there's no right or wrong answer here, right? No losers. No, they're both legendary albums for a reason, so it doesn't matter whether you prefer one or the other or which one I pick. The end game here is that we are talking about two very cool albums in the end, and hopefully this will spur you to go and re-listen to both of them again, either for the first time or for the millionth time. It doesn't really matter. This show, this Classic Album War show, is all about celebrating some great albums, and we throw a little fun into it by doing a versus, battle, boxing match, whatever, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is we're talking about them, we're looking at the songs, why they're so great, and then all sharing and discussion about it. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube every damn day. So tune in tomorrow and Friday and probably over the weekend. We're going to do some more classic double album wars, because put your seatbelt on, because starting next week, right after the Labor Day weekend, we're going to go into classic live album wars for the next month or two, as long as it's going to take me, all right? And so that's going to be a lot of fun. I know many of you have been asking about that, and I kind of teased Classic Album Wars before on the Facebook page, but never here on the YouTube channel. So we're going to dive right into that. So there will be polls on the Facebook page, like every day. In fact, you can go vote for these two today. It's a tight battle, a little closer than I thought. Vote for these two today and every day going forward, but starting next week, live albums, all right? So you don't want to miss that. So stay tuned. We got more stuff coming up. I got a couple top 10 song shows coming up this week. We should be having Jeff Young guesting. All right, I'm going to spill the beans. Jeff Young and I are going to be doing some top 10 song shows. One of them, Angel. The other, Bebop Deluxe. So we're going to be recording that hopefully tomorrow, maybe Friday, tomorrow or Friday. So those will be ready to go before the weekend. And, lots more stuff cooking in the weeks ahead, so you don't want to miss any of it. So don't touch that dial, folks. Tell your friends, make sure they subscribe, sign up for the alerts, okay? Because we've got some great content coming your way. All right? See you soon. Bye-bye.